Hello, everyone. It looks like, oh, and Hunter just joined. So we should have quorum now. Yes, we have 3 of us. Okay. So we're waiting on one more.
Melody, I don't know if Alan reached out, but he's not going to make it tonight.
Yeah, he did. He said to text him about 15 minutes before we get to the reservoir discussion so he can hop in for that one.
So he actually just sent me a message saying he's just going to need to bow out altogether.
Okay.
Unfortunately. So I think I'll still send him a message, I mean, when we get close, but I don't think he'll be.
I know Erica's planning to be here, so she's probably just running a little late.
Miranda or Melody, was there an official agenda sent out?
Yeah, Melody sent it out Wednesday.
Okay.
I can attach it for everyone though. Give me 1 second. Okay, I just sent it.
Garrett, I may have forgot to add you to the email, so I apologize for that.
Do you not get SAB listserv emails, Garrett?
I think I do. I just don't remember seeing it for some reason, but I might have gotten it. I'm not sure.
I just sent it and I think it's to the listserv. So if you're not getting it, then I need to double check the listserv settings.
No, I got it. Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Thank you.
Good.
Erica said she's going to log on in just a minute, so we'll be able to start once she logs on here.
Laura just asked for the meeting access information, so I'm going to send that to her.
Okay, awesome. We got Erica.
Y'all, sorry about that.
And Erica, are you ready to take notes?
I am.
Perfect. So we will call the meeting to order at 6:52. And the first thing on the agenda, I have to get back to it, is to talk about the Boulder County Sustainability Grant. So for the last 2 years, we've applied for this grant to partially fund Garrett's position. And so that application is coming up again soon. I forget the exact date it opens, but I think we'll only have one more meeting before the grant cycle closes. And so Erica and I and Chris met with Leah from the county to kind of talk about what it looks like to continue using this grant moving forward. So I'm not sure, Erica, if you want to go over some of the main points or if you want me to touch on them.
Melody, why don't you start and I'll jump in.
Okay, so I believe we get 15,000 for the Boulder County Sustainability Grant. And so we'll want to apply for that again, but in the application, we're gonna also need to talk about how much the BOT and the town is willing to contribute to match that grant. The idea of the grant being used for this position is that slowly the funding will be more sustainable within the town budget to be able to fund this position. And then we can open those sustainability grant funds up in future years for project funds. But for now, we feel like Garrett and his value is really important and really opens up the opportunity for us to even have projects. And without him, then, you know, what grants can we apply for? What projects can happen? We really need the staff person that can coordinate all that stuff. And so last year, the BOT contributed, I want to say like 7,000 or 8,000. I don't know if you have that number, Miranda.
I think it was 3,750, right, Chris? Garrett?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, The 37.
Okay, yeah. I don't know why I was doubling it in my head. So we were going to seek if there was some way that we could ask for more contribution from the town so that basically the sustainability coordinator position has more hours that it can work in 2022. I did send an email to Miranda to ask a little bit about some different funding sources. I know it might be tricky to convince the BOT to increase beyond that 3750 match. However, we were talking with Chris and he has a potential for some funding towards this position in the public works budget under kind of a zero waste category funded by the C&D demolition funding. And so that isn't necessarily a long-term ideal strain of revenue to fund this position, but perhaps it's a possibility to fund this position in the next year or two as we really try to transition it into a full town position. So we talked about asking for more, and I also asked Miranda about plastic bag fee funds, but I'm not sure if you have any numbers on that.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to leave that off. I mean, that's not really being actively collected by town. I'll tell you, some businesses do submit it. I think if that was a desire, we'd really need to revisit the execution of that plastic bag fee, because right now it's like $5 a month.
Okay, yeah. And so generally we're looking for SAB members' feedback and kind of support of how much you guys think is reasonable to ask for, what questions you have for Miranda or Chris about different funding possibilities. And then we'll need to put a grant application together, which is going to be really similar to the application we did last year. So I'll open the floor with that.
Melody, if I could add a few things.
Yeah.
So hi everybody. Sorry I was late. Had some broken glass. I was cleaning up. Sure y'all know how that goes. So thanks for that recap, Melody. A couple things I wanted to just take a step back with. Is for the new members. So sustainability coordinator position, Garrett is 2 years running now. We hope to continue working with Garrett for a long time, but Garrett just finished graduate school. Part-time hours is not sustainable, as we all know. And so we're trying to really bolster this position to a full-time position, something that is a sustainable, strategic, permanent part of town staff. That would be the ultimate goal. And I just wanted to talk to you guys about kind of how this came to be. So a sustainability coordinator has been a goal for the staff and for the really for the town, people at least that were focused on sustainability for over a decade. And it's actually written in some of the strategic plans for sustainability for Netherland. And then really Garrett has changed how projects happen through this board. So Garrett, from my perspective, has become the common thread. So when the rest of us have really crazy things going, this is a volunteer position, Garrett's the common thread that keeps these conversations rolling and returns back to them, goes off, does the research, comes back to us. He has conversations with Boulder County, talks with other community members. You know, it's really changed kind of how SAB operates from my perspective over the last 2 years working with Garrett. So I wanted to just step back and see, does anyone have any questions about how we came to this position? And then I also think it's really important that we make sure we're all on the same page that we want to apply to continue Garrett's position for another year. If you are hesitant about that, let us know why. And from my perspective, again, you know, as a qualitative researcher, it's this concept of being upstream. So yeah, we could apply for $15,000 for, let's say, a greenhouse. We're not going to do that, but we did in the past. That's a project that a sustainability coordinator could work on, right? And could find outside grant opportunities for. So my idea is, or my concept of Garrett and the sustainability coordinator position is that it's upstream. So really Garrett can encompass all of those other little projects and work on those little projects that would be downstream topics, greenhouse, zero waste, renewable energy projects, solar ed, for example. So there's some, if you have questions about that, let's talk about it. All right, I'll table there.
I'll add something. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Chris Felcher. I'm the Public Works Manager. I've been to AB meeting, and geez, it could be a year. Not really sure. Anyway, yeah, I'm fully supportive of this, and I guess I was wondering, Miranda, if you had a chance to discuss with the BOT what, you know, you kind of have a finger on their pulse of what their priorities are, and what do you think of increasing the funding and the possibility of increasing funding for this position is?
Yeah. So the budget work session that we did, I presented this as one of the possible new positions. The board members who were present, of course, loved all 4 that I put forward. I think their feeling is anytime there's grant funding to keep a position going, like if that's possible for Garrett to go that route. Now, if Chris, you had it in your budget to cover him, then of course the board would love that. I think that the question just becomes, how do we fund it? They want to see that we've already come up with funding and we're not trying to use the fund balance to do it.
No fun. I mean, how do they think they're going to add positions with no money?
Well, so that's just it. So, sorry, further clarification. They are going to use the fund balance, but the fund balance only covers one position. And I will tell you that of the 4 presented, the board was more interested in the grants manager and possibly the parks manager at this time. And we're hoping that Garrett could continue one more year in the current, or hopefully it's Garrett or whoever, one more year in the current structure that it has. And perhaps if there's funding in your budget, maybe increasing the hours. But that's kind of the original pulse I have, is that we may see the board use that fund balance for the grant position. Melody did ask me if, maybe we could do a hybrid. I think the challenge the board is going to have with a hybrid is that that's no different than what we all do already when it comes to grants. It's kind of our side gig. And so they'd rather see a dedicated role versus a sustainability coordinator who has a portion of their job as grants, because it doesn't solve that problem of why the grants manager was even introduced.
Okay, well, as Melody said, there is $5,000 budgeted for the zero waste line item in the public works budget, and that could go to this position. And I'm just wondering, is there any amount that they would agree to? I mean, $5,000 is not very much. Do you think the BOT would, with the support of SAB going in front of them and kind of pitching for it, would the BOT support an additional $5,000?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, Melody and SAB team need to come out and support. I will tell you that parks manager has probably already received almost 5+ letters of support. And so you need to come out just as strong. When the board did rank the positions, again, it was just Mayor Pro Tem Baumhofer and Trustee Taylor at the budget session. So we were missing a whole group. The sustainability coordinator really fell kind of third in line behind parks and grant. And so if the desire is to push that up, they need to hear from not only SAB, but community members like Erica and Melody. If there's people who obviously have worked with Garrett, like Karen Blakemore and those types of people, get them to come forward so that your letters of support have that community component. That's what they're going to want to see.
And also to remind them of their commitment towards sustainability and their goals of renewable energy by 2025. I mean, they made that goal.
Yep.
And I think they need to be reminded of that.
I agree. I mean, they loved it. And they loved all the positions that we brought forward. I think they all have value. I think where they were looking is that grant managers can kind of somewhat fund themselves through the acquisition of grants and putting in the project management fees. Parks has an opportunity to potentially fund itself through, if we brought on Ned Rink and Mountain Tennis and their income. And so I think if the sustainability coordinator, if there's also a way to demonstrate maybe, Chris, the use of C&D or some other stream of revenue that could offset, like if the percentage we keep from C&D was committed to Garrett's time, that will help the board too, because that seems to be why the other positions kind of were pursued more, is the possibility of revenue to offset cost.
Okay, that zero waste line item is actually C&D.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, it's just been whatever revenue we get from that is dedicated towards zero waste. And that's what the BOT asked when we first enacted that. That's really what I'm drawing. I don't know what we're going to get, but that's.
Chris and Miranda, thanks for chatting about that. From my perspective, sustainability coordinator could fund themselves more easily than a grant. Well, maybe not a grant writer because they're going to target any grant, but definitely a parks person because it encompasses all of those topics, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess if they really are committed to sustainability, all of those things are so heavily reliant on sustainability efforts and concept. So yeah, we need I'm happy to go in front of the BOT and I'm happy to work on a presentation to really support a sustainability coordinator position. And hopefully Melody or Laura or Liz, Constance, do you all be interested in doing that as well? And
So Erica, I just want to stop you from putting that time in. So, it's a work session where public comment is typically not taken and you wouldn't have an opportunity to do a presentation. So it's your letters is going to be what I need. And it's, I need those by Monday at the latest. The sooner I can get them, the better, because we launch out a packet tomorrow. But that's what we're going to need. And of course, people can call into the work session. I just wouldn't bank on being able to kind of verbally sell it. You need to do it in that written format. For just the work session, obviously there's further opportunities, but Mayor Larson also didn't want us, like third party of sorts, to do any selling of the positions. He wanted me to just kind of present the facts and then use letters of support to drive further discussions.
okay, that makes sense. Sounds like we have two things. Like, do we want to support writing the BOCO grant for Garrett's position for a third year? Is anyone opposed to that? And then the second thing would be really trying to look for more money, and that's going to be actively reaching out to the BOT and writing letters, finding community support. Am I missing anything?
I think that's, yeah. And again, fast turnaround, I guess, like if anyone's open to just like even throwing out a quick email to me that I can include in the packet tomorrow, that's great. And I do just want to drive home that there were only 2 trustees at that work session. So the position priority may dramatically shift from what Julian and Jonathan thought to how all 7 of them feel.
And Miranda, this board could also go in front of the BOT just as an informational item on a non-budget subject or budget meeting. Is that right?
Yeah, when we start to do the hearings before the Board of Trustees, of course, there'll be public comment. But if you wanted to do informational, that works too at a future meeting. I mean, really the goal though of the work session next week is to get an idea of what position the board wants to run with. It's probably pretty unlikely we would do all 4, and 2 I think is also pushing it. I really kind of need them to narrow down on at least 1 or 2, and so we can start to identify what the funding is behind that person's salary more than anything.
And I really think there was traction from the county that they would pitch in money because some of Garrett's work really affects outside of Netherlands borders. I really got a sense that they may be able to shake some money our way, just not in 2022, because Leah needed to spend some more time on it. But they had also mentioned that, and maybe this is something you can look into, Garrett, like the Solarize program, for example, if you are also trying to use that same template and mimic another community, we might be able to expand that funding using their sustainability tax fund. So those are just some thoughts that we.
Yeah, I talked with Dave Hachimoji about that a little bit before the program launched, but I'll revisit with them on that because it can definitely be applied to other mountain communities too.
Miranda, the other thing that came out of this meeting too is that we could have the potential to continue using the BOCO grant money every year for a contracted position like Garrett. So if it's actually a town staff position, then they really want to limit it to 3 years. But if it's a contracted position, it sounds like it could continue. So I don't know if there's any way to like institutionalize Garrett's position, but then also have like a certain number of hours that are contracted and we continue with the BOCO grant. So that could help the BOT, take on a certain amount of funds for a position, but also know that this money is guaranteed every year as well. Again, it's grant money, so maybe the guarantee is, never going to be there. But that was new. That was new to me, and I wasn't sure if Melody had known that before as well. When we first applied for it, it was really couched as a 3-year temporary support, and then they would wean us off of those funds.
So are you saying, am I hearing you correctly though, like we'd really need to make the position like a part-time position, say, 30 hours, so that then the remaining 10 was funded through the grant?
If we wanted to count on grant money, that could be an option. So
Okay,
that was new to me. Again, like if it is a contracted person from, sustainability coordinator to the grant fund every year, it could continue. If it is a town staff person being supported by that money, it's different. So we may, if we did like 30 hours, or maybe we did 20 hours, we found 10 from Solarize, we found 10 from, or 10 from the BOCO grant and 10 from the county. There might be some room to get creative with that.
okay. Yeah, I guess I'd love to explore that more. Of course, I think it is hard to do a position without any sort of benefits. Of course, that's cheaper to town, but, having someone be able to have health insurance, they need to really be a full-time employee. So I'd love to explore that more. Like, can they be full-time salaried and then we just offset that? Or yeah, what does that look like? What are our opportunities from the employment standpoint and how we would categorize that person? Is that possible to like meet with them of course, we would need to know how the board wants to go. So if the board commits to wanting this to be our next full-time position, I think that would then be next step, is can we do kind of that hybrid approach?
Yeah, and then potentially we could get 2 new staff members.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk to Leah about it. Again,
Cool.
what Chris mentioned with the conversation about potential funds from the county. She was going to go back and talk to folks at the county about that option, but it did sound like that there is potential there. There's some optimism. So I think it's worth circling back. And again, at this point, we're not asking, for a full funded sustainability coordinator now. Like that's the perfect vision. But I don't think we don't have everything set together to do that at this point. So we're looking to increase Garrett's funding for whatever the town can bring this year, this next 2022 BOCO grant cycle. And then that would be the C&D, potential any BOT funds if there's $5,000-$10,000 available. And then really kind of talk to the county, like what could this look like, and transition to that moving forward. And please correct me if that's not correct, Melody or Chris.
Yeah, I think where we're at right now is 15,000 from the BOCO grant, 5,000 from the zero waste line item, and then asking 5,000 more from the BOT. That would put us at 25,000 total.
So, and perhaps then I went into the budget session. So I went into the budget session as an ask for this to be a full-time salaried position. So if I'm modifying that ask, then I think, yes, the likelihood is incredibly high. I just want to confirm that that is the desire of everyone to not pursue this, or I can pursue it as both and say like you could do a salary full-time, or it's kind of as an or option. Am I hearing that correctly? That maybe that's the desire?
I think either way, Miranda, we want Garrett.
Okay.
And if we want to keep Garrett, we have to get Garrett more money.
Yep.
Is that right,
Okay.
Garrett? You need more money.
Well, I think it's valuable to present to them that yes, we love all these positions too. As the sustainability board, we're definitely in support of somebody to manage parks. That's been needed for a long time. We're definitely in support of a grant writer. That helps everybody, right? But we have somebody who's hired right now working and developing this position and developing these projects, whereas all of those would be new hires, not somebody who's already been doing work. And so to continue and build on that, I do think is important. I would like to see if we can ask for either or, to maybe present both options to them and ask how they feel about, you know, that in the budget for 2022. And I'm almost wondering how likely the BOT would be to kick in 15,000 instead of 10,000.
So increase Boulder County Sustainability Grant match to 15,000.
Yeah, so 5,000 of that is coming from Public Works.
With 5K. Yeah, I'm gonna add this in here. So I've got, I'm actually working on building the slides, and so 5,000 coming from Public Works. And so here, I'll just quickly share my screen so everyone can see what I did last. So in essence, I just provided them super brief description of the position. I provided them with 2 copies of different job descriptions, one from the city of Fountain and one from the city of Wheat Ridge. Took kind of an average salary range. Of course, oftentimes these positions are paid so much higher than this, but this is kind of a feasible range that town could take on. Does not include fringe. I'll include this as an alternate option. And then I'm also going to add to all these slides, like kind of the revenue funding. And so I'd like to do, Chris, talk about how the zero waste line item, the zero waste, is that what you said? Zero. What's that line item called?
Zero waste.
Zero waste could support with offsetting this. Because I think that's what they want to see more than anything is like, yes, there's an understanding that you're going to need to pull from different funding sources, really the fund balance. But right now the fund balance is only sitting at 52,000, which say you hire this person at 60, that doesn't even touch their fringe benefit. And so we have to be able to show that there's opportunities elsewhere. And then of course, if the person was brought on and could enhance the C&D, of course, the goal of C&D is to give the money back to the contractor because they diverted their waste, but there still is an admin fee we take on. So if that program was run a little better, I do think it's an opportunity to have more revenue. And then you obviously have those builders who don't want to divert waste, and then for them, those funds just sit with us. But other funding sources that could offset this?
Miranda, I was just going to ask that because we also, the Excel energy charging stations or vehicle charging stations, that was a big grant opportunity that we didn't necessarily. Well, Garrett, can you speak to that? What other revenue funding opportunities are there?
What we include, if you're talking about the DC fast charger, that's really only supposed to cover the cost of the electricity coming to that charger. So there wasn't, that was sort of already sort of displayed in the grant. I don't know how the energy office would react if we decided we were going to raise that, but it is our machine, so maybe that's a possibility. Yeah, between that and the C&D, I don't really see any sort of revenue stream.
But I mean, they're there. I mean, obviously, it's like Boulder County Co-Responder is another one of them. And of course, there really is no revenue stream there at all, which is why this one fell pretty low on the list. I think the tricky thing with the fund balance, and that's why they're looking for alternative revenue, is while town is in an awesome financial position, anything can happen from year to year. So what we don't want is this position entirely funded on kind of this excess in sales tax, and then we can't support it the next year because 2022 is rough, and I don't think we're projected to go that way by any means, but it's just really mindful that having alternative funding streams to tap from is going to be beneficial. Not necessarily covering it as an entirety, but having some sort of offset component. So I'll present this as and of course, love, what happened last time is that we did have people call on, they were on the call and then the mayor asked them to speak, or excuse me, Jonathan asked them to speak. And so I would encourage you to call into the work session and I'll send you all the meeting information tomorrow. I just can't guarantee they'll be asking for public comment.
Miranda, could you go over my audio tonight has just been really spotty. Could you go over the part about writing letters and what they should contain and how many you need?
As many as we can get. And they should just say that of the new positions we're proposing, that you are supporting the sustainability coordinator and why.
And who should those go to?
Send them to me for now. I'll put my email in the chat for everyone. And then I'll add them into the packet.
I apologize for not introducing myself. I'm CT Hutt. I moved to town yesterday.
Welcome. Yes, I just put my email in the chat. So townadmin@netherlandco.org. If you get them to me in the next 24 hours, otherwise, then you could send the future ones to just BOT. I'd like to put them in the packet instead. They hold a little bit more weight than them getting inundated with emails when they can see them in the packet.
I think it would be really compelling to have a discussion for a minute about what Garrett's accomplishments are, just in terms of, you got that grant for the fast charging stations. Like, I think that sometimes the BOT members I've spoken with are like, okay, how does paying for sustainability coordinator balance against just paying money to buy things like solar panels or charging stations? And I think you bring a lot of value, but I think that it needs to be very explicitly put out there for the board to see all the ways that you've moved the needle. And it may not be that you're funding your own position, but you're bringing money to the town by way of, through Solarize, you're moving the needle without the town having to pay any money, right? With the Excel grant, you're making progress. And I think if your progress is really explicitly shown to the BOT, that would be helpful. And I think if people were writing letters, if they had that at their fingertips, it might be really useful for people who are writing letters.
I can send you a list of accomplishments. I'll send that to SAB tomorrow at the latest.
I think that's helpful because I do think you've accomplished a lot. And I don't think people know about it unless we say it.
Garrett, didn't we have that outlined in the last PowerPoint presentation? Or
Yeah,
I was
just scanning my email. I was like, I know I put this together somewhere, somehow. So let me just find that, and I'll forward it all to you. But yeah, I know I put that together at some point in time.
All right. Does anyone else have any comments or questions about this position and using the grant for it?
I will say I haven't received the letter, but I have been informed by CDPHE that we did get a grant for the waste diversion grant that we submitted earlier this year. So that's $25K dedicated to recycling hazardous material and hard to recycle material. That'll be a program we do next summer, as well as we're going to build some recycling containers for town events. They haven't sent out the letters yet, but I know someone at CDPHE and she let me know.
That's awesome.
Melody, do we need to actually do a vote to make sure that everyone approves using or applying for the funds to extend Garrett's position?
I think we have, when is the grant deadline?
I don't know if it's announced yet. She said she was going to announce it in the next few days.
Yeah, and do you remember how long she said it was going to be open for?
6 weeks.
So yeah, so we have another meeting, and I'd like us to come to the next meeting with the draft grant application, and then we can vote on it and approve it there. Because we'll need to know what the BOT is willing to contribute for the application.
Melody, that sounds great. I'm happy to write the rough draft of the grant. And do we need to know what the BOT will contribute? Because I think it's still, I assume that the BOT is still willing to contribute the $37.50 that is required of the grant if we get 15,000. And then anything beyond that would just be a benefit to the position. But maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, I guess that's right. We could still write it with the $37.50. I think it would show the county that we are dedicated to this position and we're trying to move forward if we could get a commitment for more from the town and include it in the application.
Okay, that sounds good. I don't see any announcement of this year's grant opening. So hopefully we'll hear from Leah in the next few days. And then I'll just get started on it. I'll share the doc with everyone so we can coordinate on that. And then we'll just make sure it's ready for review, formal review by the next SAB meeting. And we can submit after that.
Perfect. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is Green Business Program Update.
Yeah, so this one's mine, and it looks like Matt's on the call too, so thanks so much for joining, Matt. Last meeting, we went over the timeline for the Green Business Program. I can throw the link to all of that documentation in the chat. So if you haven't provided your comments to me, please do. It'd be really helpful. The first step was to get approval from the NDDA. That was supposed to happen this month, but we got pushed to October. So we're really on hold for that meeting to happen. Once we go through NDDA, then we'll make a presentation to the BOT. But really the plan is to launch in January. You know, my concern, and Matt, maybe you could provide some input on this, is the staff time it takes to sort of not just to launch this, but to maintain it. You know, Matt, obviously there's, you know, we're trying to figure out how to sustain a sustainability coordinator within the town. So do you have any advice on sort of the staff time it takes to support a green business? And that helps me sort of design the program to make it, you know, less time intensive. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. Hey everyone, I'm Matt Hannon with Boulder County Partners for Clean Environment, PACE. So I know a couple of you, I think. Melody, we met a few years ago. I've been on a couple of these meetings, but it's been a couple of years since my colleague Dave Hatchemond is usually on. But I help run basically the green business programs in the county as part of my job. Most of what I do is like business sustainability advising. So give out bike racks and rebates, and recycling bins, and all that good stuff. Yeah, so the green business aspect, though, I kind of work a lot with the town and city sustainability coordinators throughout the county. And Longmont's got a program. Lafayette had kind of the first one about 9 years ago. Louisville was next up about 4 or 5 years ago. So I work with a lot of those folks, and those are significantly larger towns with a lot more businesses. So a lot of the time they see 30 businesses apply, kind of thing, 40 businesses. Erie and Superior have come on the last couple of years as well, and I think they're more business wise, numbers wise, they're kind of in the same boat as Netherlands. So you're talking 50 to 100 businesses total maybe, and so they have 10 businesses or so come on, 5 to 10 join the program. I know Ned's a pretty tight community, and I worked quite a bit up there compared to those two towns. On Tuesday I was up there and cited some bike racks for Kathmandu and got some recycling bins for Barb over at 20 Lakeview Drive, that whole complex, and I'm getting some new refrigeration equipment for Rod Mitchell's buildings, covered wagon, mine shaft. So I'm actually a little more in touch with I think the Ned businesses than I am in a lot of other towns. I also like Ned a lot more because I like the mountains and I like going up there and hanging out. But in terms of time, a lot of my job is to support the coordinator in this program. So I will be doing like site visits and I'll be helping with the applications. So, I know Garrett's pretty limited on his hours at the moment. And so part of my job is to help alleviate that workload. It's tough to say, an exact hour amount that, you should put in for this program, because it's kind of, front loaded, just getting it organized, getting the benefits lined up, getting the word out about the program, doing the whole launch. And then there's the next phase, which is kind of getting the businesses to sign up, and me helping them with the application, or Garrett helping them. If we're going through the Green Biz Tracker, which is a whole another thing, but it's basically an online application with a bunch of yes, no, not applicable questions about how sustainable the business is. And then the end part would be recognizing those businesses. So you set that application period, which I think Garrett said was like a January to July timeframe maybe. So giving them 6 months to fill out the application, make any upgrades they want to do to get extra points on the application. And then August is going to be its own little time, time consumer in terms of doing an event and, organizing that. So yeah, it's tough to say exactly hours per week, but I think Garrett's got a pretty good outline that we provided him with from Superior when they launched their program a couple years ago. So it's kind of the bones are there. It's just kind of filling in the gaps and catering the program a little bit to what you want. But it really shouldn't be more than 2 hours a week, I'd say, for Garrett to kind of run this program. That could be anything from answering questions from businesses to helping with a couple applications. Like I said, there's not going to be 30 or 40 participants the first year. It's going to be like 5 to 10. It's kind of the goal usually, maybe more, because Ned's a tight community and there's a lot of pretty neat businesses there that would probably want to take advantage of this kind of program. But that's just kind of my thinking at the moment.
Cool, Matt. Thanks for that. That helps me. That's sort of what I was thinking and hoping. So thanks for that. Are there, Matt, do you have any other updates from your side, from Boulder County or from PACE? And are there any questions for Matt or I about the Green Business Program from anyone else on the call?
I will say that I've worked, I've been with PACE for about 6 years, and I've been working up in Ned for, pretty much all of that time. So I have a pretty good handle on like the businesses up there in the community, and, work a lot with, Hunter up at Eldora and a number of the other businesses in town. And so I can just kind of come up with like a list of who I think would be the top candidates for this kind of program. And Garrett, that's something Garrett and I, and if anyone else is interested, can, do specific outreach to those businesses and say, hey, we know you've upgraded your lights and you've got, recycling and compost, and, you have solar or EV charging station. And so you'd be great candidates for this program. But obviously you 8 or so that are on this call really know the community probably even better than I do, because you probably live up there and personal friends and relatives of a lot of these businesses. So, we always say, Garrett and I will help, kind of take the lead on this program, but certainly the sustainability advisory board members play a role in doing some of the recruitment and getting the word out there, and being involved in any way that you want to be involved. So the first year is kind of a pilot year, see what goes right, what goes wrong, and then we improve from there generally year after year. But obviously I'm here to answer any questions and provide any support that we can from the county side of things.
Something like
Awesome.
this
Awesome,
just
Matt.
is it mostly for retail and restaurants, or is there a component that could be for office buildings and real estate offices, or, you know, kind of just places that aren't exactly normal retail type
Yeah,
businesses.
totally. I mean, like, yeah, Steve Carroll's building, his new one, just on the backside of that 20 Lakeview Drive property is like prime candidate. It's a new building and LEDs and EV charging, and he's got like all kinds of stuff going on there. So it's anybody. We've even certified home-based businesses. It's not really the intent of the program. It's more so for the restaurants, for the retail. But yeah, like, peak-to-peak realty. Or peak performance realty, they could still join. I know they're going to be upgrading their lights pretty soon. So it's really those brick and mortar businesses, we say, those on commercial meters. But if a home business wants to join, they can. We have shied away from like Airbnb. People have had like an Airbnb room or something that they want to involve, and we've kind of cut the line there. So that's not really something that we're trying to involve. But HOAs is something Erie is looking a lot at, because they got a lot of HOAs down there in Erie. Not something that's as big in Netherland, but if you guys had, some kind of idea as to, oh, well, this, kind of business is kind of a funky thing, will this qualify? The answer is probably yes, but it's a Netherland program, not the Boulder County program. So we let you, as the advisory board or Garrett, kind of decide what's going to be the best.
So something like town hall, if their building is efficient, could they get it even though they're not retail, or somebody like a commercial landlord?
Yeah, so City of Louisville is technically a participant in the Louisville Green Business Program. The town, though, I will say for Pace, we only can provide our kind of rebates and offerings to private businesses. So the town could participate in the Green Business Program or the building, but I wouldn't be able to go in and help, pay for a lighting upgrade or give them recycling bins, that kind of thing. But the town building could still, potentially be a participant.
Thanks.
And Laura, just so you know, this really came from the Zero Waste Subcommittee and their desire to increase waste diversion at our restaurants. So we're really targeting restaurants for this. But as I think Liz was talking about, her relationships with ACE and BNF, like, we certainly want to involve all the folks that we can get. So if you know of business owners, then we definitely want to include them.
So I have, this is a question, but it's also maybe kind of fantasy island question, So when we're talking about zero waste and helping, especially our restaurants, when I was doing the composting for the school and I was hanging out with the composting trailer all the time, one of the questions that I have is, if we could provide a day where the compost trailer could literally just kind of go down First Street and allow the businesses there to bring out compost, if we could encourage them to, I found that the storing of compost in 5-gallon buckets with lids in a refrigerator made composting pretty palatable. Is that something that, and I don't know, Matt, if this is something that kind of falls into your category, is that something that we can talk to the county about? Like, can we have an extra day where our compost trailer or another compost trailer could come up from town and be specifically just designated for businesses? Because right now, a business cannot take their compost to our transfer station. That is not allowed. It is only for residential composting. And so would that be something that other communities have done, or something that we could do? Storing and composting in our community is a little bit trickier because of wildlife. So I'm just curious if there's any precedent, or if you guys have any ideas on that.
Yeah, definitely. Something like that is, I actually worked with the Old Gallery in Allen's Park earlier this year, because they're kind of thinking of a similar thing for hard to recycle materials. So like, batteries and old fluorescent bulbs and that kind of thing. And they're, it's a small community, kind of like Ned, smaller than Ned. And, they're talking about just doing, getting the word out and having one pickup, once a month at the old gallery, and they're gonna like organize it. And that's something that's totally doable, I think, in Netherland. You could just, have the trailer go right down and let everyone know, let Ron Mitchell, let his tenants know, and anyone else, Rasham at Kathmandu, be like, hey, get compost service, organized. And that's something we help with internally. I will say that if you're looking at something that kind of that larger scale, having the RCD, or Resource Conservation Division, who runs like the recycling center here and does a lot of outreach with compost and education, there's someone else to definitely bring into the mix. I do like zero waste trainings where I talk about what's compostable or not, and we provide some compost bags and some compost bins. We have that kind of infrastructure. But if you're talking about like kind of a bigger pickup type situation, that's something to definitely bring somebody over the RCD in to the conversation, because they've probably dealt with that kind of thing before. But not necessarily exactly what you're talking about, but they'd have a good idea of how that would work from just the zero waste side of things. But I think it's a very doable thing to have. You just have to have the input of the businesses, have them on board, understand what goes in the compost, understand that it's going to be picked up at 1 o'clock every Wednesday, or whatever the date is. But I think it's doable for sure.
My apologies. Does Nederland send all of its compost down to the Western Disposal Facility?
Yeah, the compost goes to A1 Organics, which is out in Kingsburg, east of I-25. So,
Okay.
And that's where Western takes theirs as well. They don't actually process compost at their Boulder facility. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, that's right. There's some political issues that we're trying to get a compost facility in Boulder, and there's a couple plots that have been pinned as good ones. But there's been a couple people, not in my backyard kind of thing. But so at the moment, it all does go out to Keensburg. But hopefully, in the next couple of years, we'll see some movement on a much more local facility.
I'm sorry, this may seem like a silly question. Does the town have access to a tractor?
Chris would be the one, or Miranda would know that.
Yeah, we have machines.
So going back to what Liz was talking about with the trailer, Matt, would you mind getting me in contact with somebody from Resource Conservation Division? There's, as you probably know, there's the Front Range Waste Diversion grant that's being offered right now, and you have to submit, that deadline's the 20th, and that's focused on organics. And so there's a couple ideas floating around the zero waste subcommittee. One of those ideas is a local in-vessel composter that would be put at like Busy Brews to handle all their compost, and maybe some compost from neighboring restaurants. My idea was, hey, can we get a 30-yard roll-off and, have Western pick that up? But again, there's smells, there's wildlife, probably not a great idea. But I do like Liz's idea of a trailer coming up and down, and that might be, we might do that as a pilot program as part of the Green Business Program next year. So there are some funding opportunities, Liz, where we might be able to do something like that.
Yeah, I'll definitely put you in touch with a couple of contacts over there. My main contact just left, but I know Darla is kind of the main. She heads up the entire Resource Conservation Division, and so I'll put you in contact with her, Garrett, and maybe one or two other folks over there, because I'm not sure who the best person would be. There's been a little turnover the last year and a half, like there has everywhere. So I'll put you in touch with a couple of folks over there, though.
Yeah, because Kennedy just left.
Yeah, Kennedy's who I usually work with.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I know a couple other folks over there, though.
Something to add to this is that a number of years ago, Kip Nash presented these giant compost bins. Ron Mitchell was willing to have them on his property. And my understanding was that you use one at a time. They had to be turned very infrequently and would help us really limit even having to go down the hill with compost. Chris, you had sent an email about an idea similar. Do we have anybody that's talking about this anymore?
Yeah, so that's what my conversation was with Tanya Unger and Greg. He used to actually serve on the SAB a number of years ago. Anyway, I'm meeting. I talked with them last week. I'm going to meet with them again next week up in Ned to really hammer out the details of what they're thinking. But they're basically trying to get at least one. It's like an industrial sized composter. I don't know where they're going to put it because they are huge. It's like, 10 by 20 or something really big. But that's sort of their plan right now. And I think Greg works with some sort of sustainability business up there. I was unfamiliar with what he said. Perhaps you know who I'm talking about?
I don't really have the details on all of that, but I know that there was a really strong movement a couple of years ago, and that there is or was an industrial composter at the high school. And so I can contact one of my colleagues who has a greater grasp on this history and see if I can, verify if that composter is still in the community or if it's been moved. But this is not, this has been talked about, that it's around.
Yeah.
If you would please, Liz, because that's where I'm vetting sort of all these different options right now. So if we can get some in-vessel like composting thing in town that doesn't require a lot of work, then that's probably like the easiest and most sustainable solution rather than trucking compost up and down the hill.
Garrett, it might make sense to talk to Kip Nash too. And if you don't have his contact, he was in charge of Ned Compost when they would actually bicycle around and pick up folks' compost.
Okay.
My understanding with the big industrial bins that he presented to the SAB a few years ago was you needed electrical outlets, and that was tough. But Ron Mitchell was willing to donate some of his property downtown, and then they would have to put in an electrical outlet, which was the biggest expense. I think they could find somebody to fund the compost bins themselves. So it'd be worth touching base with him.
Yeah, I think we're talking about sort of the same idea because Greg was also part of that Ned Compost team, and he's talked about Ron Mitchell providing electricity. But yeah, if you can send me Kip Nash's contact info, if you have that, I can just reach out.
Yeah, I think Alvin Mites, if you remember, he was on the SAB for a while, was also a part of that team. I don't know if Kip is still involved in it. I think because he does the farmers market. Last I talked to him, he had passed it on. So perhaps he can let us know. Yeah, that's his email.
Yeah,
perhaps
I'm working with
let us know who it's on now.
Yeah, I'm working with Greg Wilson.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. Lots of compost discussion, which is actually was one of the agenda items. So I think we probably covered that one. So that's good. Cool. Any other questions about the Green Business Program?
Garrett,
All right.
just
Go ahead, Erica.
one more tangent is, just having this conversation and thinking about this funding sources for these positions for town. I'd really like to start, an unconventional idea, but I'd love to see if there was a greenhouse gas reduction equation involved in these positions. Like how much actual, support do they bring to reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Netherlands? Because if that is our ultimate goal, if we are concerned about climate change, which we'll talk at the end of the night, even if we could get more compost facilities up here and not drag them down the hill, that's huge weight. That's a lot of fossil fuels. I'd like to see more of a conversation of, that benefit and that like economic savings.
Yeah, I agree. Boulder County did their GHG inventory in 2016. Unfortunately, the scope of work there they don't get at sort of the scope 2 and 3 of, these emissions. So it's, what does, how much methane or CO2 does compost produce in landfills, but we don't talk about the transportation emissions, transporting that material down to Kingsborough. So it's a little bit hard to get an accurate number because if you look at our GHG inventory, Our waste sector is so low. Like it's not even, it's maybe 2% of Netherlands GHG emissions, so it's, if we were going simply by that, then we shouldn't even be talking about compost. But there's obviously other environmental benefits of, than just greenhouse gas.
Yeah. What about like solarize and things like that though?
Yeah, that's fairly easy to calculate. Yeah, and of course, Excel does their annual community report, so we can easily see how much renewable energy we are increasing. So yeah, I think we can easily do that. As well as energy efficiency, that the work that Pi did, and last year.
Yeah, Garrett, if we could get some of those numbers as far as supporting a sustainability coordinator role, that would be super helpful. Because I think it would be a slam dunk. I don't think any of those other positions would be able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions like a sustainability coordinator, if that really is where our focus is in the town.
Hey, Garrett, you spoke earlier about you wanted comment on the business plan. It looks so thorough to me. I didn't even realize that you were looking for input. So what kind of input are you looking for on that? Because the proposal that you wrote just to me looked really thorough and well planned.
Okay, that's fine then. Yep, that's good. I mean, we're not going to plan everything today or this month. We're gonna continually be talking about this. So if the timeline looks good with you, then there's no red flags. That's really what I'm looking for.
Great.
All right. Well, Matt, feel free to join or enjoy your evening, or both. But yeah, thanks so much for being on the call.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think you guys have my email address now, so feel free to send me an email if you got any questions, anything I can help with up in Ned. Yeah, I love coming up there. I'll be up there again in a few weeks to drop off bike racks and recycling bins for a bunch of businesses. And I'll plan on being up there a whole lot more, I think, over the winter and as the Green Business Program rolls out. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Perfect. So the next thing on the agenda is a discussion of the bylaws, which Miranda sent out to us shortly before the meeting. So if you check your email, you can see the draft in there. Miranda.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that delay. I realized I hadn't sent it. So really what these bylaws are is your kind of a combination of the two documents that already exist, but more focused on the creation of SAB. What we're trying to do here, though, is streamline all of these a little bit between Planning Commission, SAB, and ProSAB. So this does mirror ProSAB pretty well, just because you are kind of set up similarly. But what I've done, it just has, the specifics of who are you. I'm not entirely sure what's identified as your mission statement. But let me just run through this, but I'd like to revisit Article number 2 here. We talk about membership, how there are 7 of you. Really, there should be 3 local, 3 could be out in the greater area, and then we'll add in the 1 alternate. In terms, it talks about how you serve 3-year terms and how we would handle vacancies. Removals is only completed by the Board of Trustees, so I go into that. What is in responsibilities, I pulled this directly from the creation of SAB, that resolution. I'm so happy to kind of talk through these too if you want to see some changes. Talk about how we meet the 4th Thursday of every month, that you are permitted to meet virtually if you need to, which is great. I know Erica, we talked about that historically, but because the bylaws didn't allow for it, this would allow even kind of post-COVID to come together in a virtual or hybrid format once we get the hybrid piece sorted out. That you can hold special meetings, talk about how there are 3 officers being 2 co-chairs and a secretary, and the definition of kind of their roles and responsibilities. And then that you can form committees as needed. Your quorum is 4. And then the rest is just kind of that kind of legal jargon, though, that we'll keep all of our minutes in order to comply with sunshine law. And that these can be amended by SAB. We'll still give them, to the Board of Trustees as like an FYI, but that these can be amended as SAB needs moving forward. So I saw a comment here. Let me open my chat back up from Erica, but would just love kind of your initial feedback. Erica, we'll get them a new flyer at the library. Anyone have, and I know I just sent this out, so no rush on these because you will vote on them yourselves. So if you wanted to just take them and revisit this next month, that's totally fine. There really is no timeliness behind this. It's just kind of cleaning things up.
Does anyone in the group, I know I'm relatively new, but does anyone in the group have any objections to the bylaws as the way that they are being proposed?
No, I think it's great to be able to have these, actually official bylaws and be able to kind of gel with the other boards and how they work and how that process is a little bit better.
I think the 2 big things here is the addition of the alternate, so we can post for that, and your ability to have hybrid meetings. Otherwise, kind of content-wise, it was just a cleanup. Maybe my recommendation would be, though, for SAB to take a minute, not necessarily tonight even, or Melody, if you want to do this next meeting, to talk about whether this is not really a vision state or a mission statement. So maybe if you want to revise that, I'd love for you to take a look at that and your responsibilities. Some of these are wordy, they kind of repeat themselves. I think the word provide is used like 6 times in one sentence. So they're a little funky. And I just love if maybe the board took some time to look over those and just see if these are a good reflection and if there's a way to maybe just clean up the language a little bit. But again, I just pulled this straight from the creation of SAB document. Would SAB be open to, like, between now and the October meeting, maybe providing some of that, like doing track changes and providing some of that feedback?
I'm open to it.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. One of the things
No.
that's new to me is the 3 members have to be resident of the town and 3 can be outside in the greater Netherland Mountain community. What happens if we lose people on the board and we no longer have that?
So this is actually, so thank you for bringing that up. I should have mentioned this. So that's a pro-SAB thing. I haven't really found anywhere in SAB where that's kind of a similar requirement. I think you do need to be careful not to ever have a board that's staffed only with or consists only of people outside the community, because the taxpayer dollars are obviously coming from the community. I have yet to run into that issue. And if this is a concern, this statement here for SAB, we could obviously revisit that.
Yeah, I think, Miranda, historically, from my experience, it's been people outside of the town limits and sometimes people in Caribou or, just outside of that boundary.
Okay.
And I think if we limit ourselves to just those 1,500 people for half of the board, we might get ourselves in trouble.
So, Miranda, I kind of have the opposite feeling on that. I feel like Nederland taxpayer money needs to have representation by the people who sort of have their money where their mouth is. I feel like if we get too many people, that if we have people outnumbering people who live in the town, then I just think we can get kind of a little bit off base with representing the people of the town, because as much as people are always trying to do the right thing, their incentives aren't exactly aligned always when the taxpayer money and different laws and stuff only apply to the people who live in the town.
Laura, I hear you, but where do we deal with taxpayer money other than the BOCO grant? But that's the greater Netherland community.
Well, any proposal we make, you know, whether it's a law or something like, you know, asking the town for money to pay for something, it is the people of the town. I think it's great to have people from outside of town, but I don't think that it should outnumber the people who live in town. That's my opinion.
Laura, I think I kind of agree with you. I feel like as a person who spent most of her time living outside of Nederland, I do understand the burden that the town carries for the entire region. And I think it costs the town a lot of money. And we provide services that can't be found anywhere else. I think that people outside the community should have a strong voice, because for most of us, it is our town. But the people that live here, especially for me, the difference between living outside of town and living on First Street it's just a whole nother animal. And I think that people in the town should have the priority and the lead voice, because as residents, we carry a greater burden.
Yeah, and this is Constance, and I agree, even just with the issue of water, which we're going to discuss, I think, a bit later, that ultimately falls on the folks living within the town boundaries. So yeah, I agree with Liz and Laura. I think it's really important to keep, yeah, at least a good representation from town members.
And I agree with that too. As we're talking about water, some of the people in the group are talking about their own water, and other people are talking about it as more of a theoretical. They care about the community, but it's not quite the same as level of skin in the game for people who live out of town.
Yeah, I think either financially or resource-wise, really. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I hear what you guys are saying. I guess I just have a totally different perspective, having looked at places in town, and there's a very few number of houses available in town. And there's very few turnover for those houses in town. And there's a lot of people in our community that would prefer to be in town, but they actually don't even have that opportunity. So their children go to school in Netherland, their post office is in Netherland, the grocery store is in Netherland. You know, all of these amenities they rely on are Netherland. Their zip code is Netherland, but they can't even buy a house in Netherland because there's so few homes available. So it's almost like this right of privilege that I'm like hearing. And I understand it in some ways, but you know, we bid on a house on Navajo, and we were outbid by so much money. We didn't have a chance. You know, so we had to look outside of the boundaries of the city, the town. So I think I don't this skin in the game thing is kind of interesting to me, because we are in the same zip code, but yet there's still this boundary, and it's like this arbitrary boundary that I don't know if it's actually that accurate anymore. And it doesn't seem like it serves Netherland.
But I think that's why there's representation from outside of town too. I think we just need to keep a balance. And yeah, and I just want to say, just from my personal experience, living in town is a privilege, but it's also, I think, you have to be ready to put up with a lot because the houses that are available usually have a lot of problems. I mean, my house is loses 12 inches in 10 feet, so I don't know many people who are ready to put up with this. So it's yeah, I guess it's just personal choice. But I think the balance I think this conversation just goes towards saying how important this balance is to have town members and also representation from outside of town.
I think if the concern is that what if component that Erica had mentioned, what if we can't find people in town? You could always add a clause here, and I'd like to run it by our attorney, the wording that, maybe with SAB recommendation and Board of Trustee approval, this balance could be shifted. And say it was only 2 members who are residents and 4 who are of the greater mountain community. You could add that piece. I think Erica, you bring up a great point. And of course we serve, I say like Netherlands population is 1,500, but we're serving 3,000 plus because of that bigger zip code. I think the challenge that maybe SAB's going to run into, and we've talked about this before, is like when you run programs like Solarize, we really had to narrow that in because that was town match funding that can only go to Nederland residents. And so I think you are going to kind of always be in that weird balance of what becomes Nederland specific because there's a financial backing behind it versus what can we do for the larger community.
Yeah, that's a good point, Miranda. I think I am concerned, if we lose some folks like Liz, you're off the board, right? I mean, you've moved out of town and who's gonna come in? And I think the balance is important, but I think that it wasn't originally part of SAB when it was founded, right? We can't run for the BOT. I can't run for the BOT as someone living outside of the zip code, but can I use my sustainability knowledge and help advise the town? I hope so. Yeah, it's just an interesting conversation, but it was never part of SAB to begin with, and I don't know how I feel about adding it in.
I think we can, again, we can remove it. I would say in talking with the Board of Trustees, though, I think they often do want to know if the person is a resident or of Nederland or a part of the greater community. And so I think that's why this balance exists within ProSAB. Again, though, ultimately, these are your bylaws. So if you guys want to just sit on this one for a little bit longer, the goal was to kind of align them all. Of course, Planning Commission, you have to be Nederland resident, BZA. And so SAB was the only one that doesn't require at least some form of a Nederland resident clause, like all the rest do. And so that's why I put this in here to mirror ProSAB. If the desire is to remove that's fine. I think, we will just know that they may come up as a question by the Board of Trustees because, of course, while they don't approve them, we'll want them to be aware that these have been modified.
So historically, I do have a little bit, just 2 little tidbits of why I know SAB chose to set it up in the way they did, where all 7 could potentially not live in town. And that was because, well, I guess 3 tidbits. Number 1, like you said, that the BOT already gives preference to those who live in town. And then the other 2 points are that sustainability is really something that we need whole community buy-in for. And as we can see with things like Solarize, and as we can see with, these discussions about can Garrett, incorporate with these other towns, and then we have a mountain-wide sustainability coordinator, in which case the county will pitch in, it takes a community, and so we need that buy-in. And so I do like that it's at least 3 and 3 in this proposed bylaws, and that's the way the other town boards are run. So I'm not necessarily against the 3 and 3 at all. And then the other point was that Oh, I'm blanking on it. Oh, that anything that the SAB does that affects the town budget or is a major project has to be run through the BOT anyway. And so even if the 7 members of SAB are not directly within town limits, any vote that's going to happen on a SAB project is still going to be through the BOT, which does have those requirements of it has to be Nederland residents on the board of trustees. So that was kind of the workaround and the points that I was given when I came onto the board, whenever I came on.
Having only just arrived in town, somewhat reluctant to say anything, but it seems to me that for an area as important as sustainability, including as many people from the community at large would be a great benefit to an organization. At the risk of leaving it understaffed because of something of a technicality of geography seems an undue risk.
Short-sighted. Miranda, I'm just curious, how do you think the Board of Trustees would feel about leaving residency out of who gets to serve? In which case I don't have to resign. And then the other piece is, I see that you're making changes to the document while we're talking. Are you going to be able to send that to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send this to you. I'm more than happy to remove this component here. I think though Liz brings up a really interesting point. You know, as we're virtual, are you looking to have anyone who has vested interest in Nederland, or does it need to be someone within the greater Nederland area? Like if people move out, can they stay on? I think that's kind of, I don't want to say the risk you run. That's just something you need to assess. Like if you remove residency, I think the board, that needs to be explained to the board that you're removing residency in its entirety.
Because I will continue to be a homeowner in this community, but I won't be physically here.
Sure.
So it does kind of, it's an interesting question. And of course, you know, I don't really want to resign.
Liz, where are you moving to?
I'm moving to Sitka, Alaska for 2 years.
Wow, that's exciting. I think Miranda, Camille was was a mover and shaker in our community for years. And she's the first person I think of. And it was tragic when she left the board. There was a huge gap to fill. And it was no question for her that once she was out of community, she, was going to go put her actions into her local community where she was going to be residing down in the flat. And I feel like this is like a privilege to live within the town limits, and maybe other people that don't live in town don't feel that way, but I definitely do, and I feel like it's this arbitrary boundary and this distinguish against one group versus the other, and it feels a little discriminatory to me based on the nature of the SAB board.
I think the balance is important. I do think, there's just a difference between the people that live in town because we pay different taxes. When we're talking about, and I don't know the answer to this, but when we're talking about money to ask the BOT to pay Garrett, where is that money coming from? Is it just from the people within the town? It's not an arbitrary difference. There's a difference in the tax base. The Netherland tax base, we just pay a different taxes, and much of the money that I think that goes to the town and the BOT is from the people of the town of Nederland. And so to not have those people represented means we're not representing the people of the town. Am I saying that I think, Erica, you and many other people who live outside of the town have great things to offer, but I don't think it should outnumber the number of people on the board who live in the town.
Laura, I completely agree with you. I just don't think it needs to be written in our document. It never has been for a reason, and I don't think it belongs there now. I think we can prioritize that as a board. We can say we don't want this person in because they're not a Netherland resident. It's going to tip our numbers. But I just, to have it written like that, it doesn't feel right to me, especially given the history of people that have run on the board, and people that stick around, from my experience, are not people that live in the town. So, you know, I've seen really dedicated people that live outside the boundaries that we might lose because of this number ratio thing. And somebody goes in and we have to fill it with someone specific that might not have the experience or the knowledge of the town. They might be brand new. You know, like I want as much people involved as possible, right? That's what we want. But people show up just to get on the board and then they never show up for another meeting and don't get involved with these projects or subcommittees. Like, how do we get more people involved, not limit who can be involved?
Yeah, well, I think a great strategy is the subcommittee strategy, where those subcommittee members are not guided by any needed residency. And you know, we got the zero waste subcommittee right now. We've got that whole crew of people that are working on like the green business program and the front range waste diversion. And so it's really awesome to be able to actually see more people involved that way. And I think that's a major role that Garrett fills, is being able to coordinate things like that, as well as us as a board being able to kind of talk about these things and guide these things and go to the BOT to ask for grant funding to help with different things. And so that is a way that we can still incorporate people from all over the county, especially when we want to get more people involved, even beyond the 8 that we're going to be able to have at meetings with the alternate. So, yeah. So I guess we will take time to look at these bylaws, put your thoughts and comments in, think about a mission statement and what that looks like, and really think about this 3 versus 3 in and out of town residency. Is there any residency terms for the alternate?
There's not. So I think the way in which ProSab has it, because they do have the residency requirement, is that alternate could be either a resident or a Nederland or of the greater mountain community.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, Miranda, you pulled that wording about the 3 members from the ProSab.
Yeah. So, yep. So in talking with our attorney about it, that was her concern, is that we don't talk residency here. Planning Commission, Board of Zoning Adjustment, DDA, Board of Trustees, and ProSab all have residency outlined in their bylaws, but SAB, he didn't really have bylaws, but SAB's documents do not. And so she actually did bring up that point of like, can you live in Texas and be on SAB? And I think those are things that you have to consider when you don't have residency components, is then what is that boundary?
It seems, you know, it seems to me like the zip code is an appropriate place to start. And then someone like Liz, you know, if she wants to stay on the board, she grew up in Netherlands, like has so much value and experience to offer, then, you know, Liz is allowed to stay on as long as she wants to. We also have laws where if somebody misses a certain number of meetings, you know, they can be kind of voted off the island, right? And I don't know the exact language. Melody, you can speak to it. But I would feel much better about that. And then we prioritize residents. We're sustainability, you know, there is no boundaries.
And historically, that was the philosophy of why it was left out in the original creation of SAB, with the charter and everything.
So what I'll do is I'd like to go ahead and just send this out while everyone maybe mulls this over, and perhaps here where I provided this comment box, you could just reply to it with your thoughts. And I think really what would be ideal is in October, we have a revised version, you all vote on it. And so whether that has residency or not, or it's 80466 or you just need to be a homeowner here, the DDA, Liz, for you to know, like the DDA says, if you own property in Nederland, you can vote on the DDA mill levy. And so there's a lot of property owners who own but don't live here and have a say. And you can also run on the DDA board if your property resides in their district. And so SAP could approach this in that way. I mean, you do have options here. I just think you need to, our attorney is recommending that you do define residency, because if you don't and someone from Texas applies and you say no because you live in Texas, you have no grounds. Say it's a vacancy and it's only one applicant, we typically always approve that person. We have to be careful of if you then can't say no because they live somewhere else. So food for thought. Thanks for the lively discussion. No, that's a big one. So I just think that's the best way to go about this, is just throw your thoughts in here. And we'll just kind of take it offline and comment there and then move forward. Sorry, Erica, go ahead.
Miranda, one thing to add to that is, we were talking to Leah Yancey at the county this past week, and there's discussion about funds going to the sustainability coordinator within the town of Ned for working with unincorporated Boulder County.
Okay.
So, that would be a very specific thing to add as far as who benefits from that. So something to add to that.
Are you saying put it in the bylaws, or we're talking larger scale, like when that position becomes available, outlining that in their scope of work?
Larger scale,
Okay.
There's been discussion about like whose money is getting spent from within the town, and I'm looking for the specific tax break as far as what Netherland residents pay versus unincorporated Boulder County. But that's a Boulder County-wide sustainability fund, and
Okay.
I'm just curious to see how that's divvied up. And I know based on the population of 1,500 for the town of Ned, the minimum amount is 15,000, and then larger communities get a lot more money. But I'm just curious to see, if we really isolated Nederland as far as sustainability initiatives, how that might limit our scope of impact and opportunity.
I think what you would need to do, though, is as these projects roll forward or that grant funding comes forward, if there's a memorandum of understanding. Because, again, while Nederland supports the larger community of 80466, like we have a financial due diligence to reinvest those funds locally. We can't turn around and reinvest them into Eldora. And so I think where those types of programs, when they happen, and there was say grant funding for the sustainability coordinator, I don't know even if it's in your contract, Garrett, but it's so somewhere we document what the expectations are of Nederland versus larger community.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the trend is sort of offering these programs to the larger community and not just town residents. Solarize was for the whole zip code. The grant that we just received, we put in there that this would be available for, area residents. We didn't just narrow it to the town limits. So that's sort of the trend, is we're offering these services to more than just town residents.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though, when we came into the match, the town match for Solarize, though, that was for town residents only.
Yeah, the town match, certainly,
Right.
but there were four people that signed up outside of the town. And so they did benefit,
And I think that's what it always is going to be. It's the second town is investing financial resources, and whatever that is, that's where the scope has to be kind of pulled in a little bit. Unless we are using larger funds, like for example, the town cleanup. Of course, that's a Nederland event, but we don't turn away anyone from the larger zip code, but it's Boulder County funded. That town does provide some financial resources into it. But Chris, I mean, mainly Boulder County's money we use. So I just think that's always going to be the piece that SAB has to look into, is just balancing out how town resources are used to support programs that are benefiting the greater community.
Yeah, Miranda, that's been part of the conversation, like the entire time I've been on the board is, what is our renewable energy goal? What is 2025? What's the boundary? And we always say, like, for the town, and then whatever else outside of that we can get on board is a benefit, or we talk about it, with Excel. Do we want to set the boundaries of the town, or we want to do a larger zip code? I mean, it's like constant as defining Nederland. And I don't know if anyone else has had, other experiences than that, but that's definitely been very specific. If there's funds from the town, they go to the town limits, and everybody else can be involved, but they don't get any financial benefit, either direct from rebates or whatever that is. The BOCO grant that we applied for a few years ago, 2017, maybe 18, with rebates, solar rebates. Jen applied to that application. That was direct town residents. We also had then matching for efficiency audits for homes. That was town benefit. It's been very clear since I've been on the board that funds never go outside of the town if they're from the town.
I'm just wondering too, then maybe we should, not in the bylaws, they don't belong there, but maybe draft some other document that provides this greater clarification, so that we don't, I feel like we've questioned it a few times now, and so that we are kind of memorializing how the larger scale in which SAB supports the community, and then kind of how that intersects with finance. This is not something other boards and commissions run into. So I think it could be helpful, so we don't have to like debate it every time. We just have a written understanding of these pieces. I mean, if SAB is interested in that, we could start to kind of draft what that document might look like for you to review at a future meeting. And I think that could help too, Garrett, like as you're pursuing different conversations with third parties, for them to understand kind of that an MOU of sorts of, yes, you're supporting the greater area, but here are kind of the town specifics you need to be aware of. Would SAB be interested in something like that? Or is it helpful to at least just know the town financials and what that means for projects?
Well, yeah, I think the financial piece is important, but we run into this. It's different every time.
Sure.
Where, for example, with some other renewable energy stuff, which I'm more focused on and interested in, but, if we define just the city limits, our impact is just the city limits. But really, we have these 5,000 people as a greater group that we want to reduce their greenhouse gases. Like the whole goal is to reduce the greenhouse gases, right? As far as renewable energy and other pieces as well. But ultimately, climate change is the biggest threat. And so we have always like weighed the benefits and the costs from what I've seen. So yeah, we could go to city limits. It might be easier to hit our goals faster, but our impact is going to be less. So let's do the zip code and really try to look at what's the greenhouse gas footprint of the entire zip code of Netherlands, and how do we reduce that as a whole so that we can reduce climate change more than we can if we jump the goals. So
I agree. I think though, then, I just always go back to money. I think it's any project you do from a data analysis should always be 80466. But then when it's time to execute a plan, if we're looking at funding, then we need to go to Boulder County to offset that and say, like, teamed up together, here's your data. We'll kick in Nederland, you kick in unincorporated.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking at with this sustainability coordinator fund. When we talked to Leah this week, is Garrett is working on initiatives that overlap with Ward and Jamestown and Lyon. You know, so how can we get some of those funds to help do this work that is such a direct relationship with these other mountain communities that don't necessarily relate to the plat? So, yeah.
Are those funds available for projects, or those funds would just be for Garrett? Because I guess I'd like to see that larger agreement, not just his time, but it's a set bucket of money we can pull from for project execution.
Yeah, I mean, I think Miranda, we've got some issues to face. You know, even
Yeah.
tonight, I'm hearing a us and them
Mhm.
mentality, and it doesn't feel good. And so there's an us and them mentality between us and Ward, and us and Jamestown, and us and Lyon.
Yeah.
And I think to have greater impact, we need to really dissolve that us and them difference, duality, which isn't real. It doesn't really exist in a lot of ways. And then we could potentially have a mountain-wide coordinator. And that's a conversation we've had for years. You know, we had that meeting, I don't know if you were there for it, in the community center that Boulder County hosted, and it was a mountain-wide sustainability meeting. And the idea was to start talking about how do we have more collaboration. And we've talked about a mountain-wide coordinator. We just talked about it this last week with Leah, and it's we don't have the relationship built. And if we keep doing these boundaries, we're never going to really build these relationships. To then have a position that is mountain wide, and we all get to benefit from the impact of this E&D program that Chris has, that nobody else has, and the greenhouse that Ward has, and the greenhouse that Jamestown has had, and the programs that they've done really well at and learn from each other. So, you know, it's a larger conversation, it's a larger challenge, but the us and them is not going to help us get anywhere.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is a much larger problem. And then, of course, when you tie finances into that us or them line only gets stronger. And I don't think I worked for town when that meeting happened, but more than happy to sit in on future ones if we're going to keep pushing that conversation forward. I know currently town's a part of a roadmap to recovery project that includes 4 other counties. And so that's a great opportunity to kind of blend some lines and pull together Estes and Lyons, Nederland, Clear Creek County, Gilpin, and Grand. So that's a kind of a cool new collaborative effort. And so I think the groundwork is being set to eliminate some of these lines, but definitely more work it needs to be done. So, and I'm happy to help and provide, sit in on those meetings or whatever you feel like you need from me, from town staff side, to kind of push that forward. I'm happy.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, part of that is also, you know, like Erica said, like we need to find a way to where these towns want to use their funding to ask to pay for a position, and all these towns have an MOU and pitch into a position. And so that's such a large discussion that in order to get there, we really need to be able to be offering them something up front so that they want to come into that discussion and they want to be a part of it.
Absolutely.
Hey, so what I'm wondering is could we capture some of this desire to eliminate boundaries and to have greater sharing and teamwork with not only just within our zip code, but also within the region and the county? Maybe we can capture that in our bylaws. And, you know, because I agree, you know, the larger our impact can be, the better. I agree on that side. And then on the other side, I know that people who live in town also have just a greater burden to bear. And if anyone has any questions about that, they can just be here on Halloween and then they'll know. And that's just one example. So I think it's a really great debate and I have really enjoyed this conversation. Let's see if we can capture that and represent it in our bylaws and make it something that we work towards.
Yeah, and
I guess I'd love for you to put your feedback. I'm almost thinking though that maybe that doesn't belong quite in the bylaws, since bylaws are more of an internal operating agreement. And we're looking more at I don't know, standard operating procedures or something. There's a different word, but I put the feedback. I would love to see it in the bylaws, but I think we may want to pull that out so that that's a document that we can keep kind of working on as we build these collaborations.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something related to how that like us versus them relates to the membership is also that while I mean, I of course, you know, I totally agree that climate change is a global issue and it has to be solved with collaborations like the type of that Erica was just talking about. I also think that it's important to stay local in the actions that we take because it's so easy to get to be spread too thin. And, you know, we have the most power in our local community. And that's why I think while we should definitely aim to like lead by example and collaborate and spread our efforts as wide as possible, the action starts locally. Yeah.
I just sent you the updated drafts with just some initial tracked changes. And so it would be nice to get those back from you. Let's see. Maybe the Thursday, the 21st of October. So that way I had a kind of a couple of days to provide some recommended edits based on your feedback. And I'll send an email the week prior as a reminder.
You said October 31st, Miranda?
October 21st.
21st, okay.
So Melody, I see that you have me next for 18 building codes, and I don't really have much, but maybe I'll just jump into it. The board did give us the green lights to keep going with the drafting of the ordinance. And so I guess, Garrett, we just need to get the specific, I would imagine our goal is to just do the specific Boulder County language, which I feel like Ron's already given to us, but I can't search my emails to save my life because of all the changes I'm going through. So do you have that you could send to me?
Yeah,
Okay.
I've got a PDF version though. So do you need like a Word doc?
I think we can always convert it, or she can just I think she just wants to see it for kind of scope of language for the amendment. So I think that PDF should be fine. And then
Okay,
we'll meet. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure if I have I think we'll end up having to draft our own language because we're not exactly adopting Boulder County's residential building. So it might take a little bit of work putting all that stuff together.
I think and that's the purpose of the meeting next week. So just so you all know, Garrett's a part of our building code review team. So Jennifer Madsen, our attorney, will be on that call, Garrett. And the purpose was to discuss like, do we just want to go from scratch, or do we want to kind of pull and pick pieces of language? And so I guess for SAP to know that's really where we are, is that we will adopt 2018 building code with the energy amendments for new builds as we've discussed in a lot of prior meetings here. So full steam ahead on that.
All right, I'll have something drafted up before that meeting, and so we'll have some sort of straw man to look at.
That sounds good. And then I think it's me again. But does anyone have questions about building code? Okay. The next thing is Barker Meadow Park. So we are going to be doing interpretive signing there based on that GOCO grant that ProSab in town received. And specifically, we're looking to team up with SAB or a representative from SAB to work on a sign with the theme of water ecology. None of us are subject matter experts, and we're not sure if there are any on SAB or if anyone wants to team up with us as we work on drafting that language along with the city of Boulder for that interpretive sign. So looking for maybe one or two of you who would want to jump in with us as we as we meet with Ecos, who's going to help with our signs, and start to pull together that language. Don't all jump at once.
I think I was on the last sign meeting. Do you know when that meeting is?
So we're going to try to meet with Ecos sometime next week. And if you can't make it, Laura, we could always get you up to speed afterwards. And really the Ecos meeting was just to walk through the area. We could then set up kind of subcommittee meetings at any time that was convenient for you if you wanted to tag in on.
So
on
it's
that.
an in-person meeting to walk around and look at the sign, like the possibility for where the signs should be.
Yeah,
And do you know when that is?
I don't. So we're either going to do it on
Okay.
the 30th or the 1st. As soon as I have that nailed down, I can let you know. And then every meeting after that would be a virtual format. But the idea is that town would draft kind of a general idea of the type of language, and then Ecos would do a markup for us to look at. But we just felt like we weren't the experts here.
Well, keep me posted. If I can
Okay.
make it, I'll do that.
Cool. So I'm going to take Laura then. And we'll keep you updated. I'd like to just keep this kind of as a reoccurring agenda item if we could, Melody, just an update on that. And we'll run the markup by SAB before, of course, we move forward on printing it, just to make sure it captures everything you feel like is needed for that area from a, not even just a water kind of conservation, but a sustainability as a whole.
Yeah, great. So the next thing on the agenda is a discussion of Nederland Reservoir. Hopefully you guys kind of looked through some of the materials. I would like to know, Miranda, where the BOT is in just like a timeline of this discussion, because I know they just kind of briefly touched on it. So we can gauge kind of what our involvement and recommendation and really what our scope of looking at this is.
Yeah, so they're currently having executive sessions where they're receiving legal advice from Aaron Ladd, who is our water attorney. That will continue in October. And then the intention is to bring forward a larger discussion about the reservoir storage in a public open meeting, probably in November.
Hey, Miranda and Melody, I would propose that we table this to our next meeting. I know Alan is very passionate about this conversation and very concerned about the discussion within the SAB board. And I'm just wondering if it's worth tabling to a time when he can be here to share his perspective and expertise on the topic.
I'm okay with that. It is 8:45 already, and we've got some updates from Garrett still to discuss. I don't think they're super long, but how does the rest of the board feel about that?
I'll add, this is Chris. I'm very passionate about this subject. Well, just why it's one of the main reasons why I came. I mean, I love seeing you guys, but it's one of the main reasons why I came here, to sort of be a part of the discussion. And I know Alan's very passionate about it too. I wanted to be sure that I could put the correct perspective on it from an operational standpoint, and the importance, right? So I'm okay with tabling it, but I want to be included in the discussion also, so I can help inform the board why it's so.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, like I said on the agenda, this is gonna be a long discussion. So it might be helpful to continue talking about it tonight, and then also schedule it on the next agenda, and just continue the discussion.
Well, that sounds good to me. I think my main concern is that the lawyers who are in charge of water law, which I think that Colorado is now starting to really experience, where some of our reservoirs are being emptied to keep Lake Powell full. We, or even partially full, because it's not full. I just feel like from listening to the presentation from the attorneys it was a couple months ago, they're urging us to make some decisions because our position is possibly vulnerable. We have had a really good working relationship with Boulder, and we've been able to store our water in Barker. We've been able to exercise our water rights, even though they belong to a ditch that is nowhere near our town. But then you look at all the concerns for wildlife habitat and the idea of putting in another reservoir to store water in a different place outside of Barker and to free ourselves from this relationship with Boulder. And you think about the possible money that could go into that and the fact that we're reduplicating existing resources. This is a complex discussion. I think that we should keep it on the agenda. Water rights in Colorado it's all about the law. So I just want Nederland to be in a good position moving forward so that it's not illegal for me to dip a glass of water into the creek and water my geraniums, you know?
I read the paper that Alan sent us. Is that the three main options, Miranda or Chris, that everybody kind of agrees are the three ways to look at this?
I think, are you
Either-
talking about the from Dave Halleck?
Yeah, and then I think
But-
Alan sent it forward.
Yeah, so Dave Halleck is not a town, does not work with town. And so those are his independent recommendations as a environmental engineer. So I'm not sure I would say that those are our only options. I think those are just things he'd like you to consider on the town and staff.
Yeah, and they're relatively speculative. And the feasibility study that was performed by Netherland to develop water rights upstream of our treatment facility, those aren't limited to just those three options for reservoirs, that is. There's a lot of different things that we could do, but those are the more desirable choices. But there are other ways we can develop water storage without having to literally build a lined structure. There's already structures there now that hold water, that hold almost as much as we need. So yeah, not necessarily exactly how Dave put it, but essentially upstream storage is necessary.
So Chris, you think upstream storage is necessary? I just wanted to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's storage in Parker, and let's put it quite well that we can't really use that storage on paper. It satisfies the town's storage requirements. However, we can't actually access it. So our attorneys do simply a paper shuffle so that we have our water there and we can release water as we take it from the creek. But really, what's more usable from an operational standpoint is having water upstream. And one example that will help you conceptualize it is that if there was a drought and the creek became low or even dried up, there'd be no way to treat water. We wouldn't have any storage, and the water that's in Barker wouldn't do us any good. We can't actually access. But having storage upstream provides that security to be able to make it through drought periods and be able to treat water. And then also having an off-stream ability to keep the storage contaminant free if there was a fire or contamination from a mine or something. We'd be able to shut off the intake structure for that storage and keep it free of contamination.
Am I right to understand that there's a 3-year agreement every 3 years we need to renegotiate being able to keep water for Nederland in Barker?
So we have to go before water, I don't know, Chris, if you're there, we have to go before water court every 6 years to show that we're doing, that we're actively moving on these conditional water rights that we have. And so, but Chris is much more of an expert on that than I am. You may have to have stepped away. So the next time we need to go forward to show due diligence that we're actively working on kind of conversion of those conditional water rights would be in 2024. So we have 3 more years.
Yeah, so every 6 years, you're right, we have to go to court to show that Netherland's serious about keeping these rights. They're just conditional at this point, and the goal is to make them absolute. And Netherlands started down this path, I think, in 1978. And every 6 years since then, they've had to go to court, and our lawyers go to court to say, yeah, we're serious. We want to do this, and here's what we've done. And they have this term, kind of legalese, called can and will. And in court, they want to know that Netherlands can and will use these rights. And so, yes, every 6 years we go before court and do this. And but as they age, looks less and less like Netherlands can and will. And so, and it looks less and less to other people who want those rights, and that maybe can develop. So it's important as they get older and older that we're making real serious effort to move in this direction.
Chris, one of the restrictions that you proposed within Dave's email, he talks about how a lined reservoir could really impact the environmental quality of that area.
Right. But he was saying because it wouldn't be connected with groundwater. But the groundwater is still there, not going away. And so I don't see how it can really affect wetlands. I mean, I'm not an environmentalist, but I understand that there's no connection to the reservoir itself. And by the way, it's not necessarily needed to line a reservoir, but because when it's connected with groundwater, there's a calculation that takes place that reduces the amount because you lose water. Technically, you lose some of it, so we're not really storing the full amount. And then a calculation is in place that happens with the lawyers and sort of the back channel folks that count the gallons, and it results in a reduction of how much we can actually store. But that doesn't mean we can't have a reservoir that's not lined. It just means we're not able to store as much on paper. The volume will still be whatever it is, 39.6 acre feet. But on paper, it'll only work out to about 15 acres, something like that.
Chris, one of the concerns that Alan has shared with me in the past is that if we were to build a reservoir, it could supply 3 times or something Netherland's current population. And so one of the main motivators for a reservoir is to expect 3 times population growth in Netherlands, which sounds like most Netherland residents still want. But correct me if I'm wrong. How do you feel about that?
No, the right is for 100 acre feet, which is correct. That's far more than Netherland needs. However, when there's evaporation and a connection to groundwater, then you lose some of that acreage to those things, to evaporation and to groundwater. But just because we have a right for 100 acre feet doesn't mean we have to develop the entire 100 acre feet. We can do it in phases and store what we need right now, which is 39.6 acre feet. And that's what's stored in the Barker Reservoir. It has value. Water's super valuable, obviously. And so the goal is to keep Netherlands water. Netherlands doesn't want to develop the entire 100 acre feet. Sell that water, right? It's a possibility. No one's saying we have to develop the full 100 acre feet. We have to pursue this right, make it absolute to secure Netherlands' future.
So Chris, you said that there was other options, but these kind of 3 were the main that you guys are looking at. What would an other option look like?
Well, I touched upon it, but we could there's a possibility of utilizing the ponds that exist right now and doing nothing with them. It requires the cooperation with the Arapahoe Ranch and calculating the existing volume of those man-made reservoirs that exist right now, and potentially sharing our right with them because they don't have water rights. They actually may not necessarily have the right to store water at all. And there could be a cooperation with them to work collaboratively that they could store water under Netherlands water right and utilize the storage of all 3 of those structures to store Netherlands water, and on paper have enough water to satisfy at least our 39.6 acres.
Chris, is it true? Are we still talking about Arapahoe Ranch, and is it owned by Public Service?
No, owned by the ranch. There is a conservation easement over it, so it can get complicated. But that doesn't preclude being able to put a reservoir in. Typically, water rights supersede property rights in Colorado.
And I just want to make sure I understand the reason we're considering this. So the main fears are that we wouldn't be able to keep using water, keep using water from Barker Reservoir, or the creek like we're doing now. That's one of them. And then the issue is, in case we're also afraid that the creek might dry up one day and we wouldn't be able to extract water from it. And then we're also afraid that if there is a fire, somehow the water gets contaminated, we wouldn't be able to use our facilities to treat it. Those are the 3 issues, right?
Yes. I'm not sure I would use the word fear, but
Yeah,
it's
maybe that was a
important to
poor
be
choice. Yeah.
prepared for things that could be inevitable. There'll be a fire in Netherlands someday. I will say that in 2000, I think it was in 2018, we had the Cold Springs fire. Now, if we had a drought and creek levels were low and we weren't able to treat water as quickly as normally, and there was a fire, and during that time in Cold Springs, fire trucks were pulling up to Netherlands fire hydrants all along Ridge Road to fill their trucks and go fight fires. And firefighting comes before drinking water. I can't turn off the fire hydrants for them. So there is a possibility that there wouldn't be enough water. One example, there could be a water main break, or who knows? These things always happen at the same times.
Chris, what's the chances of us like solidifying that relationship with Boulder for the 39.6 acre feet in Barker, and then getting some kind of pump system?
Like in perpetuity? I don't know. I don't know.
Has that ever like come up as far as negotiations with Boulder? Because it just seems like that would save a lot of money for Netherlands. It's already available.
Yeah, we've talked about it. I don't think they're prepared to set aside a certain volume for Netherlands forever. They'd rather just extend the agreement and for another few more years and talk about it in 5 more years. They want to hold their cards close to them too. They want water. And then the other piece of that is, how do you get water from there to Netherlands? So the first, step, if that was one of the choices, was to abandon this idea of building upstream storage and work out an agreement with Boulder to always have storage, Barker Reservoir for forever. That we would need to be able to pump it upstream. It'd be very expensive. Just a pipeline would easily cost millions of dollars, and then a pump station. And so it's probably possible with enough money, but actually building a reservoir or utilizing existing reservoirs would be far cheaper and easier. I mean, the reservoirs are already there.
Just wondering if there's a hybrid. Like, I was just in the Alps a couple weeks ago, one of the biggest dam in the world. Fifth biggest dam in the world. And it supplies 60% of Switzerland's power. And just thinking about, we already have this storage capacity, we already have the current setup of the creek. If we could solidify that relationship, keep going with what we do, and then if we ever needed that water, then we could talk about some kind of pump solution. There's a lot of interesting water pump renewable energy systems out there as well that could even provide electricity down the road on the way to peak goes.
That's possible.
Just at a practical level, no matter what it said on paper as far as an agreement with Boulder, if there was a real drought and Boulder was using water from Barker, there's no way for us to sort of segregate any water for Netherland, I'm assuming, right?
Well, drought's happening to everybody, so I mean that's
Right.
a good point. And we've all seen the reservoir when it's very low, and so they're storing water for their needs, and it recedes pretty far. A pump station would have to go out to the middle of the reservoir in order to access the water. and have a secure source of water, you know, from the bottom of the reservoir, essentially.
Is it right that town residents are not allowed to use like historic wells or any wells within the town?
Yes, unless they're grandfathered.
So how does that work? Like, if you're in an old house that has a well, in like, how would it be grandfathered and how would it not?
I don't know exactly. It's still in use, then it's grandfathered. If it's capped, it's not.
Bruce, has anybody talked about a closed tower so that there isn't evaporation and there isn't a leak into groundwater?
Say that again?
About like a tower, like what you see in the Midwest everywhere, right? Those big water towers that are storage containers.
40 acre feet is a lot of towers. It's many towers, many towers. Netherlands
Christi-
stores about 1 million gallons right now for consumption. We have about 3-4 days of normal usage before we're kind of sweating about how we're going to get water to residents. If we're conservative, it could last longer. Again, if there's other situations that demand water during that time that are out of our control, then it is what it is. But just to put in context, those 1 million gallons will, you know, only last a week or so.
Well, friends, I think we've illustrated how incredibly complex this topic is. And my hope is just that we can find a way to ensure that Nederland will continue to have the water that it needs. And I think that if we need any proof as to how larger municipalities are going to treat smaller municipalities and areas, we can just watch in the near future how Los Angeles will continue to get their water at the expense of everyone else. So I hope that we can find a proposal that will ensure our water security into the future.
Thank you, Liz. I think that's really an important point. I never really realized how it just seems pretty precarious to have to renegotiate it and then not really have, we're not really using the rights that we have in a way that's as secure for Nederland people on the water system as it could be, it sounds like. I'm curious too about the possibility of just whether we could reopen some of these wells just for some security for people. Is that a possibility, Chris?
You know, I don't know. Groundwater is also owned. Sounds Water is owned by everybody. Every drop of it, whether it's in the ground or even in the air, seems to be owned by somebody. I think groundwater is regulated as well. So, would probably be augmented off of Netherlands' existing water rights if we were to start opening up wells. But I don't really have the answer for that.
I know there's wells, going dry along the Netherland corridor. Folks are leaving because of that. So I don't know what the solution is there, either or, but it's complex. I don't think
You know,
if you're in the city, you have to be on city water, right? Unless your home was built before a certain period and then your well is grandfathered in. but then often those people don't go to city water unless they have to.
I think it comes back to that connection with groundwater again. You know, the reservoir is not lined; it's ultimately connected. I'll also add, you know, drought. Most people think of drought in the summer, but it continues into the winter as well. And relying on a creek that's frozen and low in the middle of winter be very precarious. Um, Netherlands been fortunate, and we haven't really had any real serious droughts, but I think we can all acknowledge climate change is happening and could happen. That could happen in the future. So it's really important to secure Netherlands water rights. And I'll just say, it's not all fear or anything like that. Netherlands actually in a really good place. We just want to make sure that we stay on this good path and make the right decisions to develop this water right and for Netherlands' future.
Would expanding Netherlands reservoirs offer any opportunities for the generation of hydroelectric power? And would that be meaningful?
I don't know if there's enough head.
Hmm.
It just don't. There might be enough flow. I'm not sure there's enough head. You really need some height to generate power efficiently. I've studied it a little bit in, you know, just on Netherlands tanks and try to do, you know, inline little turbines. And usually cost to do it outweighs the return.
Okay, thanks.
And if we were to proceed with a reservoir, wouldn't we also have to negotiate a water right contract to perpetuity with Boulder? Or would that be a different process than if we wanted to secure water rights that we have currently with them?
No, I think, you know, we'd be releasing water to ourselves and we could leave Boulder out of it. You know, once Netherlands has upstream storage, we really wouldn't need Boulder anymore.
Okay, so it'd be a different process than if we just wanted to keep the ones we have. Okay.
Yeah, we kind of rent from Boulder right now.
Mhm.
It's
And
cheap
then
rent.
since we're currently taking water upstream, there's no way of doing that. Just keep doing that without having storage. Is that storage piece that sort of unlocks a whole different process?
Yeah, because in a water right has a location, and Netherlands' current water right location is down below the dam, and that's a senior water right, which is different than the 100-acre conditional water right that we're trying to develop. And so the way that Netherlands is able to use water upstream and satisfy the senior water right folks who have priority over Netherlands is Netherlands takes the water from the stream and then asks Boulder to release that same amount of water to make up for the depletion that Netherlands is causing in the stream. And then they release that water back into the creek on the other side of the dam, which satisfies the other users that have more senior rights in Netherlands. It's really
Okay.
a paper shuffle. It really is. It's a very complicated paper.
Yeah, that's helpful context, so thanks.
Is Netherlands paying a premium to Boulder at all for the ability to store that water in Barker?
No, I don't think we pay anything, or very little dollar or something like that. You know, I don't think we pay. Netherland has a good relationship with Boulder right now. Okay, well, I don't really have anything else to add. I just wanted to impress upon the group the importance of maintaining this right and developing the right as Netherlands been pursuing for the last 50 years, and it'll be important to keep it going and stay on this path. And probably on the next step is to begin a collaborative relationship with the owners, the property owners upstream, and work and start a relationship where we both have a desire to store water, and I think together make it happen.
And Chris, would you just clarify which property that is? Is that the 5.09 acres that the town already owns?
No, that property is also downstream. I'm not sure how that came into play. You know, it's before my time. It's generations ago, but Netherland would have to move that right. Like I said, rights have locations. Netherland would have to move that right upstream, make it more usable. And so, no, I think we'd rather, or Netherland would rather pursue a spot on Arapahoe Ranch where the reservoirs already exist.
All right, thank you very much for clarifying.
Yep.
Thanks, Chris. Melody, we're at 18 after 9. How's everybody doing?
I personally am really split and really mixed on like what the best option is. I'd love to see a creative solution of working with the property owner and figuring out what we can do there, as well as, you know, if they want to also purchase some of the water rights so that they have the ability to do this, you know, or maybe that's the trade that we work out. And I do want to see some options for unlined, because you're also talking about way less cost of development at that point if it's unlined. You know, you're talking about a minimal cost as opposed to having to drain them so you can line them and do that work. And then it's just reservoirs are the typical way to go about storing water, and sustainability wise, they aren't necessarily the optimal solution as well. So I'm mixed. I don't know what I feel about it yet.
If anyone else wants to comment, I think it's relevant to talk about this. Like you said, Liz, it is really complex, and to bring this to the next meeting, and we should probably talk about it into November. Based on our earlier conversation, I'm hesitant to even weigh in, but I don't actually work off city water. So, so I'm happy to step aside and let you guys really discuss. But we do have a number of other things to discuss with Garrett on the agenda for tonight. And I personally would love to talk about the climate emergency resolution. we had talked about this in July. And so if you guys have the bandwidth, we're ready to move to that topic. I would propose that we continue talking about the reservoir potential, water issues, but move on to another topic.
Yeah, so if the BOT is gonna hold a meeting in November, we would wanna come, have an action item at the next meeting, where we would make, you know, kind of a recommendation. Is that correct, Miranda?
Yeah, that is correct. And I'll go ahead and let the board know too that that's a desire of SAB, so that we definitely make sure we don't do it any sooner than November, giving you time to pull that together.
No,
Okay,
I'll also add that Netherland does have 100-acre fee conditional, and Erica, you had mentioned selling some of that right, or maybe it was Melody mentioning selling some of that right to the ranch. But it could be giving some of that right to the ranch. You know, I mean, it really can go that far. And it really starts with a collaborative discussion with the ranch and helping them fill their needs as well. And I think that's even a possibility. And as far as the sustainability portion of the reservoirs not being maybe the most environmentally sound, I will say that a pump station would be very expensive. Not necessarily just to develop, but the energy required to pump water. A lot. Running a pump uses. That's it. I'm done.
all right, so everybody think on what they're leaning towards, what their recommendation might be. If you have any further questions for, you know, Chris or Miranda, of course, feel free to email them and ask them. And we'll come back to the next meeting, prepared to throw out some ideas for recommendations and then vote on it. So next on the agenda is some sustainability coordinator updates from Garrett.
Yeah, so the first one is a climate emergency resolution. As Erica just mentioned, me, her, and Alan were in discussion, and Eric and Alan wanted to pose a resolution to the SAB to get it passed and then presented to the Board of Trustees. And so I said I'd take a first stab at that. Dave Hachimoji actually shared with me Boulder County's resolution, and I thought it looked pretty good and a good place to start. And so I've changed a few lines to reflect sort of Netherlands. And both of those copies of those resolutions are on that link in the agenda. And so really, I think, so Erica, I've sent this to you and Alan. I don't think this was shared with the SAB, so I don't think anybody's actually really looked at this. So I think, you know, maybe a quick discussion and potentially moving this to the next agenda, to the next meeting where we can have sort of a more of a vote with Alan present is probably our next step. What do you think?
That sounds great. I just read something today that we're looking at 2.7 degrees, which is catastrophic. So there's to add that in there based on current projections.
Have you had a chance to look at the resolution and provide any comments, Erica? Okay.
I've looked over it briefly, but I think it does make sense to have everybody get some time to really think about it. And I wasn't at the last month's meeting, I was traveling, but if Did you guys talk about this at all and the reason for this?
No, so we just talked about the intentions of this resolution. We didn't actually have it really any discussion. So maybe as an action item for the board is to take a look at the resolution, and maybe we can talk about it after everybody's read it. And then feel free to put your comments in the document as well, and we can go through those comments at our next SAB meeting.
That sounds good.
Okay,
Sounds great.
great. The next item is the Front Range Waste Diversion Grant. We talked a bit about this when Matt Haanen was here. This grant is organics for composting infrastructure and basically keeping organics out of landfill. It's due December 20th. I emailed you all. I heard back from Erica on sort of like developing like a, can we just put a compost facility in Netherland? So if you guys have any other ideas on things to pursue, right now I'm looking at, in-vessel composter at Busy Brews, as well as like Liz's comment about a trailer coming up. I think that's great. We should look into that. And then also like a 30 or 40 yard dumpster put somewhere that's picked up. So there's a few things that I'm sort of looking at, and I'll certainly, I haven't even ran this by the Zero Waste team. We haven't been able to meet with them. The grant came out after our meeting, so I haven't had that come up on our agenda yet, but I'll be talking with them the first week of next month. And so if you have any comments, please let me know. All right, moving on to the community solar garden. I've been working with Namaste on, can Netherland provide a community solar garden for low-income residents? Giving low-income residents an option to subscribe. We looked at the Old Town Shop, which would have worked, but I think the board decided to use that plot for other things. So that's off the table. I met with Chris and Miranda a few weeks ago to look at the wastewater treatment plant, and unfortunately that's just too small of an area with with potential expansion of the wastewater treatment plant. There's just no way to fit a solar farm there either. So unfortunately, town-owned properties, we've sort of vetted all of them. There's just not many properties, and the properties we do own are north-facing or just have too many trees. So there's also some private land that is on the spreadsheet that I'm using. So I'll be going through those. But my general thought is that there are some awesome opportunities available for low-income residents, and we are struggling to get them signed up. And so this effort of providing a community solar garden for low-income folks is a bit repetitive, and I think we would struggle just reaching that audience anyways, because that's what we're having those struggles anyways right now. But if we can find the right partnership, whether it's a private public partnership to increase our renewable energy portfolio, then I'm all for it. But it seems our challenge is more just getting low-income families subscribed to Excel's low-income solar garden. So if there are folks, if you have any ideas, I know I was talking with Miranda a few weeks ago about doing some door knockers and going into like the Old Town area of Netherland and just putting some paper flyers on the doorsteps of folks and say, hey, this is available if you qualify. But I think we should be focusing on getting low-income people subscribed to those, because it saves them money and it helps our targets in terms of renewable energy.
So one of the properties that we kind of discussed a few years ago that is a tricky situation is the Bobcat Ridge property, which is also kind of part of this Arapahoe Ranch complex, and so I think it's kind of timely to discuss the potential of solar development as what that would look like. Is that a potential in that partnership of water rights to also say, if we're going to give you water rights and share our storage and have this happen, can you also ensure that we have this land for a solar farm? I mean, the big thing is that they do want to develop the property, and there are sustainability concerns around that as well. And so it's all a tricky situation. But I personally am in support of unique situations like that, and really finding where we can collaborate, what we can do, how can we do things differently in order to create the projects that we really need.
Melody, that's a good point. Garrett, I don't think I put that on the list when we were talking. I actually sat down with another staff member talking with a potential developer on that property, and they had the finances to back it for a solar garden. And that was years ago, but it might be worth exploring, especially because there would be the developers already as part of that project. Again, things might have changed, but that was a conversation presented.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not currently within the town limits, which is part of the process.
Yeah, I would be curious to learn more about what was discussed then. What I've been talking with Namaste is that the town would lease the land, and subscribers, would subscribe to the solar farm. And so there's really no cost to the town. I don't know how a private land, how that would work out, what Namaste would pay to lease their land, and how that would actually save subscribers. I think it gets a little bit more tricky if they're having to pay to develop the land.
I'm going to go off the map a little bit with some suggestions, and this is just food for thought and may not be realistic at all, but I feel like we've got a lot of buildings in town. What if our solar farms were not on a piece of land, but on roofs, rooftops? And, maybe we are talking about down at the water treatment plant, we've got a lot of roof space. We've got a lot of nice sunshine. There's other places in town that have good sunshine that don't necessarily, there is no open land, but there's a lot of roof space. Do we expand our conversation about a solar garden to something that isn't an open piece of land, but some tops of buildings? And, maybe if we're going to use the water treatment, maybe we're looking at just making the town itself able to power its own buildings and some other buildings with that rooftop space. And then, I think about we could partner further with Boulder Valley School District. We've got a lot of roof space there. We only have a small bit of solar at the elementary school, and I don't think there's any at the high school. But again, maybe we should just look at roof space rather than open land. And maybe we could get businesses and municipal buildings to create the space for a solar garden. I don't know if I said that. I hope that was clear. I don't know. It's just an idea.
Yeah, no, thanks, Liz. Yeah, with a solar farm, you know, we're wanting 50 homes to subscribe. You know, that's sort of generally the size where it's going to make financial sense for a company like Namaste to actually to make it cost effective. And that size, if you know the town shop property, that was barely large enough. The old town shop property. So like it's you need a large plot of land or a huge building in order to make this feasible for a solar farm for folks to be able to subscribe to. But in terms of like for instance our water treatment plant, we looked at, okay, if we cover the roof with solar panels and we cover the land, it's still not enough for the cost to work out to actually be a solar farm. We could definitely offset our energy use by using solar, but the town operations were already subscribed to a solar farm that's located east-west of Denver. So that's the reason why we're not going to do that. It's because the BOT seems like we're sort of already doing it. So what's the point? So that's the tricky part, is we're looking at, it's got to be, you know, a huge building. And if we're talking about multiple buildings and we're talking about multiple property owners, it gets complicated really quick.
How
Yeah,
much
that's my
square footage
perspective.
are we talking?
What's the town shop? Is it, shoot, Miranda's still here. Miranda, do you know the square footage of the town shop property?
Yeah, it's like 20,000, I think, was the site itself. Hold on, let me pull it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was like barely big enough. Like, yeah, Namaste was like, this is like a tenth of the size that we normally do. So
Yeah, it's 20,152, just shy of half an acre.
Part of the issue of working with multiple landowners is the infrastructure piece and the cost involved with that, right? It would be a construction project to be able to wire all that energy into something. But we do have, you know, our MOU with Excel, and I wonder if that would give us any wiggle room to ask for like a variance or something like that, where we wouldn't have to get our own infrastructure. We could just have an agreement to wire everybody's panels to their own building, and it all feeds into the grid, and Namaste is the contractor that puts on the solar panels, but Excel still has the infrastructure. Like, I'm wondering if our MOU puts us in any kind of position where we can get around that problem.
I'm not sure, Melody. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're not interrupting.
I was just saying, what about the reservoir? That's what? How many acres of open space? They do make floating solar farms.
So that's City of Boulder, and I'll tell you, anything with City of Boulder is really challenging.
Sure, I mean,
that was like the mayor's first suggestion when we were talking about solar farms. Sounds like it's just not realistic.
okay.
But yeah, I would ask Mayor Larson, because he was pretty excited about that at one time.
I think and to clarify the challenging, I think what's hard is that they have so many rules about just even the use of the property surrounding Barker, let alone Barker itself. So it would really take the county commissioners weighing in, I think, on something like this. So not out of the realm of possibility, just probably a much longer, year-plus long process, if that's the route we want to go.
Well, and who's to say Boulder doesn't want to keep that right for themselves to build their own solar farm on their reservoir?
I kind of think that the wind would take care of anything on that
Yes.
reservoir. So there you are.
You have to be some kind of durable.
Yeah, so there's certainly some obstacles, but Bobcat Ridge, that sounds promising. There's a few others on that list that I'm going to start getting to. But in terms of town-owned property, it doesn't look like we have anything feasible. So now we get into these private partnerships, which makes it even more complicated. So it doesn't, but I'd like to reiterate, like we already have Excel's low-income solar garden. If we can get people to sign up for that, that is just so much easier than developing our own solar garden.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, the solar garden's full, but based on what Energy Outreach says, there's constant turnover because low-income families are always sort of moving, and so if there's there's a wait list, we get folks on a wait list, and that's just low-hanging fruit for us. So if we can come up with some strategies on how to get people, I mean, we've got flyers at the food pantry, we've done social media blasts, and we only have like 4 or 5 families, and we know Netherland experiences the highest energy burden of any Boulder County community. So there's got to be something we can do with that.
We ran into the same thing with the CARES program, trying to get people to sign up for that. It going through Teens Inc., going through emergency family assistance, food pantry, all different things, and people just and I even said, hey, I will help people, I will nudge people, I will fill out applications with them, and people don't want to be identified as low income, and they don't respond. At least I haven't figured it out yet. It's a challenge.
Yeah, I haven't talked with with Nederland Library, but maybe we can set up we can train them on how to set people up, and maybe we can say, hey, come to the library and sign up for this low income, for the solar garden. We could leave the low income out of it. Like the verification will happen on the back end. But at least, the library can be trained on it. Maybe these folks don't have access to a computer, so just providing these folks with some opportunities.
I think that would be really smart, actually. I think since we have, I think about 30% free and reduced lunch at the elementary, if you just have people apply, you'll get a chunk of them. If you leave the low income out of it, I think might be helpful. I don't know for sure, but I don't know. It was difficult to get people to sign up for stuff that would be just totally free help. Solar garden, like, I don't know, but I think maybe casting a wider net from the front end would maybe work better. So I think that makes sense.
I'll take that on. I'll contact I know Jesse Ansari over at the library, or Electra. I can chat with them to see what they're willing to do, to see how they can help us out.
I'll bring it up to Johnny LaFavor. She's our community liaison for preschool at the elementary school. And I just want to reiterate, everything that you guys are saying about how people are reticent and it's difficult to outreach. Preschool is free and we cannot get people to come. It's hard. So
Preschool is free? Well, for low income.
yeah, if you're low income.
Okay.
Right. Moving on to the next agenda item, which is SoulSmart. Miranda, myself, and Cynthia Backey, who heads our zoning and permitting, we're working on improving, making it easier to issue solar permits, making it quicker, reducing the soft costs so that folks can hopefully find solar to be cheaper, because soft costs really chews into the quote that solar installers provide customers. So SolSmart is a federally funded program designed. They provide a toolkit on how for us to improve our solar permitting processes. So we're embarking on that, and so that's, you know, I'm looking into what it's going to take to improve those processes. And then NREL has an application that automates it all online, and it's just real simple for solar installers. You know, they just fill out an application, click submit, it gets auto approved if they fit within our standards. But we need to be on the 2018 building codes, and so that's sort of on my radar for Q1 of next year when we've made that transition to the 2018 building codes. So yeah, we're doing lots of good work improving our solar permitting process, but I just wanted to let you know that that's also happening. And that's all of my agenda items. Oh, I will say that the lessons learned for Solarize presentation that was given to the Netherlands BOT a few nights ago, not much reaction from the BOT, unfortunately. We didn't, yeah, so there wasn't much, there wasn't much reaction. There were certainly some folks that felt that there was some miscommunication between the solar installer. So there's definitely some opportunities if we were to do this again, which Erica, we should probably throw on an agenda talk about with the SAB on whether we want to do another Solarized Netherlands program. But yeah, there's definitely some lessons learned, and I can share with you my presentation to them.
Hey Garrett, I just wanted to ask quick about SunShare. I noticed that we do have an official relationship with SunShare for the town of Netherland. If you Google it, it comes up right away. Are we advertising that?
You know, I haven't heard. I emailed them a couple weeks ago, said, hey, how can I help? And then Alan has been connecting them with different organizations within Netherland to advertise. My role is very hands off because I can't promote a private company. But as far as I know, they're busy working with Wild Bear, getting folks to subscribe.
That's great. And just so you guys know, you know, I have a lot of neighbors that are on the wind source program. You will save money on SunShare if you transition, and you actually get those wrecked. Or with WindSource, you don't. So if you know anybody on WindSource, it's a great program to share with them.
Cool. That's all I've got, Melody.
Great. Does anyone else have any other items to discuss? Anything they want to put on the next agenda?
I think for next month, can we talk, if I'm always correct, we end up with issues at holiday season and what day your meetings fall. So if we can revisit November, December's plan.
Yeah.
I would say if we're going to do another Netherlands Solarized program, we need to figure out whether we're doing that as soon as possible, because we need to have the sign up period like twice as long as we did last year or this year. So we need to make that decision pretty quickly. It's kind of tricky because, you know, yeah, so we just need to talk about that.
The other thing too I have is, I guess, Liz, I have not posted for your vacancy, and given tonight's conversation, I might not right away until we kind of sort out the residency piece. And so you're stuck with us for a little bit longer, if that's okay. I assume it is, but unless you guys want me to post, or we'll just end up posting for the alternate probably in the next month.
Well, that sounds good to me. I'm hoping I'm going to have a better internet connection in Sitka. We'll see. I got kicked off a number of times tonight.
I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed. Garrett, I don't know if you saw CT's message in the chat.
I did not.
And then I guess CT, I don't know if you're interested, so there will be that alternate position I'll post. And in essence, what that is a member of SAB, but they only can vote if we lack quorum or we don't have all 7 members on. But if that's something you're interested in, I'm happy to send you the application.
Happy to think about it. As I
Great.
mentioned, I only just got into town yesterday, so I wouldn't want to step on any toes.
Oh, I love that you joined us. So I think if there's any questions, you can let us all know. Melody and Erica as the co-chairs, or myself and Garrett as staff. Let us know.
Miranda, that's
Will do. Laura and Melody.
Oh, that's right. I'm so sorry, Laura. I'm just in denial of where everyone goes. Forgot Erica's doing secretary.
The website, the new website says that too.
Yeah, so I will tell you all, I'll go in and fix that right now. Because we have a new website launching in less than 2 months, our energy in updating our old one is not high. So I'll go in and fix it right now. So if there's other issues, we'll get to it. If it's nothing like, or this I would say is urgent. If there's nothing urgent though, just know we may not update it because Peter's doing a fabulous job just putting all his time into. You all will love it, our new website, which should launch ideally the 2nd or 3rd week of November. At least I hope you love it. You put so much work into it.
Well, as long as it's better than what we have now, I'm sure we'll make it.
It is so much better, but yeah, it'll be good.
To beat. All
Right, I
right.
guess if it's not, then we have a different problem on our hands.
Yeah. So we've got a full meeting for next time again. So just be prepared for that. And we'll adjourn the meeting at 9:53 p.m.
Thank you much.
Thanks all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Bye, everybody.